while we're talking about this whole process of the gathering, of rebuilding your community from the ground up, the one thing you've got to remember is I apparently can't speak. So this is live radio, and I'm allowed to trip over my tongue. But when we talk about rebuilding from home, I'm referring to rebuilding from your home, not somebody else's. This lands right smack on your doorstep. And what we have to look at is a number of things. Now, in a nutshell, in case people haven't been watching the news, which I do my best to avoid, but I still get the information anyway, you take a look at the United States, and everything they built for the last 200 plus years has been summarily destroyed in one fell swoop. Now, it can still be corrected, it can still be cleaned up, but for those of you listening from the United States, understand it is up to you to push the issue to make it happen, because what comes next is not going to be fun for anybody, and it's going to be something that has ramifications around the world. Now, I've started putting different videos together, just little short ones, and we've already started getting, shall we say, backlash apparently from them, where people have this, some people have this idea that I am doing this as self-promotion, that I desire to perhaps make a big name for myself or something to that effect. Frankly, if I could sit back and people would actually do what they know is necessary, do what they instinctively know, or for that matter, what logic dictates that is necessary to get things moving properly and to avoid the cataclysm that mankind is building towards, then I didn't ever come out of seclusion in the first place. I went into seclusion when I was 10 because I couldn't cope with the hypocrisy that was rampant on the planet then. And that was 40 years ago. It hasn't improved. As a matter of fact, it has now been proven very accurate. Okay, that the hypocrisy has gotten right out of hand. And it's something that has to be corrected. Now, when we talk about the hypocrisy, we have the United States that is wiping out freedom of choice and free speech. We have the banks of Ireland that are now being sued by the people of Ireland for criminal and fraudulent, negligent behavior. We have churches that are fracturing. We have countries, including Canada, which, whether people want to accept it or not, is on the verge of a three-way civil war between the white people, the so-called First Nations, and the French people. And with that in mind, what is going to end up happening here, because there's more coming. Okay, China is fighting to hold together in the middle of what will be a civil war if they keep on their current path. So, what we're taking a look at, you have to take a look at what's going on and where. Even schools have gotten to the point where they're not coping. Parenting has gone out the window. So, when we talk about a way of rebuilding, now, I encourage people very strongly to do their own research, talk to your own friends, watch your own newscasts, and for pity's sakes, if you're a reporter, watch what is actually coming across your desk and ask yourself, is what I'm saying possible? And if it is, what are the ramifications? So, when I talk about rebuilding from home, let us be clear. That means from your home, from what you have control over. Now, I know I'm going to put my foot in it. I know people are going to be upset, and there's going to be all the people coming at me saying it's your way or the highway, or you think you're something special, etc., etc. As a matter of fact, all the time I was growing up, people called me all sorts of nice little names. I had your traditional bullies, but I considered myself a freak of nature because of where my memories come from, because of how far back they go, because of the fact that I remember things that happened before this civilization. And if you don't believe in past life memories, that's okay. Check your research. Check the information. You can talk to anybody that knows me as far as my ability to snoop around on the internet, and you'll find it doesn't really add up to a whole lot of success on that one. So let's start at home, shall we? Wipe the slate out. Look at the past and go, okay, here's where your problems were. These are things that you've done in the past that didn't work. If they're not working, change them. So, and I'm going to go back to this point a number of times, but we're going to start with the home. Now, take your home. If you're a single person, if you're a couple, if you've got a family that is one generation spanning or 2 or 3 generations, doesn't matter. Effective immediately. And this is going to sound like such a silly idea that you're going to go, why would I bother? There's too much to do. Well, why you would bother is because if you don't, civilization has a very, very simple outlook. When you look at the overall state of the world, that's what happens when you don't bother. So clear off your dining room table for one meal a day. Preferably breakfast, but we all know society's a little bit screwy as far as not every family has the same pattern by any stretch of the imagination. So look at your own family, look at your own home. Pick a meal that you can reasonably get, that you can all make adjustments and get back to it. Turn off the TV, turn off the radio, put the books and the cell phones aside, and sit down to one meal at the dining room table. Don't take your computer to it. Leave the laptop alone for the time of the meal. And bear in mind, I know that's a pain in the neck for a lot of you. It's talking about going back to what many of you may consider the Dark Ages. Rest assured, I remember the Dark Ages. They were not a problem sitting around the dinner table. Now, by doing that, you may be asking, what, pray tell, that has to do with anything? Okay. What it has to do with is this. When you take a look at the dining room table, at the meal, that is where communication starts. Do you have any clue at all what other members of your household are doing? Do you have any idea what they're used to, what they like, what their interests are? Any clue at all? I'm laying odds in most people's cases, the answer is no. And if we go back and we look at what used to happen at the dinner table, and for those of you that grew up in very, what I call, challenging homes, where children are supposed to be seen and not heard, tell you what, look at what the adults are doing to your world, look at what you as adults are doing to your world, and ask yourself, why shouldn't the kids be heard? You may be amazed to find out that the children have a better idea than you do. It's time to take your fingers out of your ears and start listening to the little people. Okay, and for those of you in Ireland, yes, even listen to those little people. Now, one of the biggest situation, and Kat in the chat room right now has made a point. Most families don't sit at the dinner table anymore. That's absolutely correct, and that is exactly what I'm referring to. So before people get on this neat little idea that the idea is idealistic, no, the idea is practical. If you don't have a time to sit down and talk to your own family, how can you possibly know what is going to go on? You look at it right now. As Kat pointed out, most families don't sit at the dining room table. They don't. Of course, in the United States, democracy no longer exists because people don't sit at the dining room table, and it went downhill from there. The schools have had all of their control taken out because people didn't pay attention to what was going on. Basically speaking, you start with the ground and you start rebuilding. And you can look at it and go, it's not going to make a difference. Well, you're absolutely right. If you don't get back to the table and start talking to your own friends and your own family and the people in your household, and for pity's sakes, if you live alone, invite a friend over. Okay, better yet, let's scrap the other idea of don't talk to strangers and go with, how about if you invite a stranger over? Now, in many cases, because of the amount of fear people have, you might want to have that dinner on the deck. So, something to keep in mind here is I am talking about rebuilding. Before some genius in a power trip decides to light a firecracker and set this whole world at war. And bear in mind, with the path things are going right now, you are going to find something very simple. You don't have to believe me to see what happens. Turn on the news, or better yet, look out your front window. How many people turn a blind eye when a kid falls down? A simple accident. How many people totally ignore it, either because they don't care, they're too preoccupied, or heaven forbid, if they reach out to help the kid's adult guardian, so to speak, sues them for touching their child. But yet, in a case like that, you can bet that particular guardian isn't going to help their own child. So we take a look at all of this, and you ask yourself, if the dining room table is so unimportant, why, when we go back to the civilizations that survived, did people gather around the dining room table, or around the fire pit, or around that neat little hearth of hot coals? Why, if it is such a useless commodity and doesn't work, have civilizations throughout the ages, including what most people consider a fantastically advanced civilization as far as record keeping went anyway, the Roman Empire, they made quite a to-do about eating together. So did the monarchs. And so many people, have forgotten about the basics. When was the last time you actually talked to somebody in your family? And, I'm going to get the person or the one or two people that go, well, we always have dinner at the table, or we eat all of our meals together. And that being said, carry on. This message clearly you've already gotten. You already understand it. So whatever you do, don't take offense to it. When I'm talking, if I say something that offends you, I'd apologize, except for the fact I'd have to lie about it, because the whole problem here is we were taught, we being people in general, we're taught, if you can't say something nice, don't say anything. How do you like your world the way it is? Rising prices, There was a neat little comment that I caught wind of just the other day coming out of England, where one of their parliament came out with a brilliant statement when the people were complaining about the rising cost of energy. Get a blanket. You know, I think he completely missed the message. Now, this is just to clarify something here. Rocket's just come into the room, and welcome, Rocket. The show today is about rebuilding the community, rebuilding the world from the home. And we are starting with the basic building block, which is the family eating routine. We look at it and people go, but our family doesn't get along. Well, the odds are your family doesn't know each other. And, when you talk about don't talk to strangers, there's a lot of families I know of where that is exactly what they are. They live in the same house. They are family by blood, but they haven't got a clue what each of them likes. They don't have a clue what mom and dad go through, or what the single parent goes through, trying to keep food on the table, trying to keep the bills paid. And we will get to that little issue in a minute. Now, am I going to make more miscalculations as I go along? Certainly. Rest assured, if I were perfect, I wouldn't be here. It would be that simple. But I am here. So I'm not talking about being perfect. I'm talking about treating others as you desire to be treated. The difficult part that many people run into is they don't like change. Okay, I'm comfortable with the way my life is. Well, your life is about to come into a massive conflict, because here's the ramifications that you're not aware of. Democracy goes out the window in the United States at the swoop of a pen. And hence the old saying, the pen is mightier than the sword. What no country in the world could do to the states have done to themselves. No country in the world has been able to master the state's technological warfare capabilities and beat them. Well, aside from Canada, but we didn't want to. That was an issue of we just wanted to stay put and they needed to leave us alone. But bygones are bygones. The United States built a phenomenal country on the backs of sweat, tears, effort, family. And in the swoop of a pen, your democracy goes out the window and your freedom of speech has just been shot. So now you've got a problem. Are you going to carry on with your life being perfect? Or are you going to wait until it implodes to get the message? Because what comes next is this. The states have their own problems all wrapped up in this. Canada is unaffected, right? We can stand on our own. Because I'm in Canada. Except most Canadians have credit cards based out of the states. And with the states going into a tailspin, you better watch your credit cards, because you can bet they're going to start closing the doors on the credit cards, and all of a sudden, all that credit you had access to is gone, but you still owe the debt. So this is a side effect that is going to happen. The lawsuit that has been launched in Ireland against the Bank of Ireland is connected to the global economy, the global banking systems. And as this progresses, you can bet other people are going to get the same idea. And now, of course, some people are going to say, oh, you're inciting a riot. No, I'm warning you of it. The riot's already started. You can bet some people are going to figure out that if that bank is doing something wrong, it's a good bet the other major banks are doing the same thing. So here's the cure for that one in a hurry. People running the banks, get your head out of the sand and start doing what you know has to be done, because if you don't, there's going to be a problem you cannot compensate for. Now, when we take a look at the home, okay, and we are talking about rebuilding, I said start at the dining room table, and you'll notice I said pick one meal. Now, in some families, because of the demands of work, you may find that one meal a day is almost impossible. However, it is not impossible to pick one meal at least a week where you all sit down together, and if that means postponing your golf game for 1 week, or maybe changing a shift at work so that you can actually have a meal with your family. Don't go running off to your friends right after school. Come home to see who your parents really are. Okay. And now Kat has asked a question here. And she said, you said to leave the past in the past, but some people just won't leave it. So what do you think they should do? And that's a very complicated question, and just so you're aware, Kat, I will address it. We're going to be going for a break here in about a minute and a half, and I'd like to take a little bit more time on that question. So I'm not going to start it beforehand. Okay. Now, one of the biggest things that we have to take a look at is when we're looking at the dining room table. Okay, I know I'm not perfect by any stretch. I managed to get a meal usually with my 2 boys, because I'm a single parent, and frankly, I still managed to do it. Now, granted, my dining room table isn't cleared. Of course, there's 3 of us eating, and my own dining room table happens to be 6 feet long and 3.5 feet wide. I don't require the whole thing for all of us to sit down. But it is necessary to sit down at a table, shut the computer off, shut your radios and your TVs off. The news will not go away. If you want to watch the news, there's lots of times to watch it. You can modify your time for dinner to get around it. Or you can watch it at another point, especially with today's technology. Now, when we come back, I'm going to deal with the question that Kat just put in, and then we're going to move throughout more of the house. So, for the moment, this is Keith Andrews, your host of The Gathering, live right here on the Universal Portal of Peace.